Greetings and welcome to Live from Caid. Tonight's special guest is the ineffable Duke Guillaume de Blegique. And featuring a live performance by Lady Batu Sechen Tsagaajin. Me, I'm your announcer, Master Bjorn of the Northern Sea. And here's your host, Master Laertes McBride.
You know what? The last thing I said before I got on here is I hope I remember to unmute myself. So, hey, it didn't take 3 minutes this time. So, anyway, hi everyone. That should be the first one marked off your card. Anyway, let's talk this out like with Caid specific information. Yeah, Master Mute. That's a great name. Thank you. Royal Court, the next Royal Court for the month of July, is going to be on Saturday the 25th. At 1 p.m. So mark your calendars now for the next Royal Court with their Majesties and their Highnesses. That's basically all I got. Not much else is going on. So let's go ahead and look, he's even unmuted now. Let's bring my friend Bjorn in. Hey, Bjorn.
Hey there, how are you doing?
Oh, I was speechless there for a minute.
Which is rare for you, let's be honest.
Oh my gosh. So how was your past week?
Doing really well. I'm starting to rebuild some of my SEA accoutrement, some of my gear, some of my armor, getting plans together for another Pell. So just if I can't go to events, if I can't see people, if I can't beat on and be beaten on by my friends, I'm at least going to make sure that my kit is ready when we can. So that's what I'm doing.
Awesome. Yeah, the family and I went out to Vasquez Rocks yesterday, actually, or as some people affectionately call it, Finlandia. It was actually deemed Finlandia during Cofina and Sven's reign. Their Excellencies of Altavia and Dunor got together and deemed that area during their final court as Finlandia as long as they held the throne. So it lasted for about an hour, but always in my heart, it will be Finlandia.
It's a beautiful place.
So, actually I have a quiet picture. So we went there, that's where they did a lot of classic Star Trek exteriors. And I mentioned that we were out looking for some Gorn. And of course, one of my friends so nicely supplied, well, there's a Gorn right there. So I really appreciated that. But so yeah, that was my weekend. So speaking of which, let's go ahead and turn on to your recommendations for arts and sciences in the virtual world.
Certainly. So as of late, we've been doing a lot of things that were focused, pointed, meticulous in nature. And I thought for this particular day, we would step back a little bit and do things a little for those that aren't quite as far descended down the rabbit hole. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about is for those people who find the very notion of documentation frightening to them. And that is the website, which is essentially called EasyDoc. And it is from larsdaughter.com/EasyDoc. It is a fantastic website where you just click on one of the forms. There's a basic form, there's one for recipes, and there's one for clothing. It helps you to fill out a format, and then it allows you to print it out. It is really quite neat. So it's got little bullet points. It's got areas for you to fill in the information if you're unsure of how to proceed. Let's say you are not able to get a hold of a friend or a peer or someone who does that kind of thing, and you just want to know how to get started. this is the absolutely best place to start. EasyDoc is exactly as its name implies. It's a very easy way to get documentation started. And if you have to choose between not doing it at all or getting your feet wet and trying to start seeing, okay, where would I put my references? Where would I put my idea, why I decided to do this? This is really a good website to begin. And then as you get better, you can kind of modify things in your own way. So our second website that we wanted to go to, and I can't believe that we hadn't actually gone here before, is the venerable and gigantic medievalists.net. This is probably one of the best places to go when you want to secure the sheepshank to the line before you go into a rabbit hole. This is kind of the catch-all website that has any number of sort of starting points for information on everything from new medieval books that have come out to different sorts of things like what sort of charms did they put on animals when they were tilling fields, to what was it like with Anthony's time in Byzantium. And although a lot of us might have particular books that cover particular subjects, medievalist.net is really a catch-all. You can find just about anything that you want. And if you're unsure of what you want your next project or your next purchase for a book or something to be, it's an excellent place to go and kind of peruse the site and think, that looks nifty, or I think I'll give that a shot. So those are the two websites that I have for this week. It's sort of at the more user-friendly beginners level. But then again, we all have to start somewhere. And what a better way to find out? I can't think of one.
See, for me, I would go to EasyDoc for my COVID testing. So, right? I'm
not entirely certain where that swab is going to go. So.
Oh, we can choose? Oh, well, anyway, that's different. So it's been a day. Anyway, so it's now time for our first guest. Who's our first guest?
His Grace Duke Guillaume de Blegique, who is one of our, he's one of the paragons of chivalry we have. He's also just one of the finest people we have here in Caid. He's been a landed baron of Calafia. He's been a king twice with his inestimable lady wife. And he is one of those folks that has most of the things. And yet he keeps on coming out to do more stuff. So that's who we have visiting us for this evening.
All righty. Well, I'll make you go away into the ethereal voice, and let's bring His Grace on. And here he comes, right now. Hello, Your Grace. Hello? Can you hear me? Oh, wait a second. I got to do this because I'm not muted, but it's the system he's on. Hold on. And can you, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you, Laertes.
Yeah, it's part of the system since you're on a phone as opposed to a desktop. Well, hello, Your Grace. How are you today?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. You know, I saw you in the little preview window when Bjorn said you're a paragon of chivalry in the kingdom. Your reaction, that was fantastic for me, by the way. No one else saw it, but I did. So I appreciate you coming on. I mean, there's so much to cover with your background in the SCA and what you do outside the SCA, and how you're not only spreading the combat but the ideals and living that chivalric life.
Well, I do my best, and I have a lot of help doing it.
Well, that's fantastic. So, as Bjorn said, not only were you Baron, along with your lovely lady Baroness of Calafia, which, if I remember right, has events 50 of the 52 weekends a year. Yeah. And then you did Crown twice, right?
Uh-huh. Yep.
So obviously you're a slow learner.
Right.
Well, the first question.
Remember what all those guys say. Are you a duke or are you a fluke?
Aw, that's so heartwarming. So I guess the first question, just kind of get it off the plate, is what did you see substantially the difference from those two perspectives, being a landed baron versus being the crown, being the king?
Yeah, so I mean, let me right off the bat say both experiences were delightful, and I don't want to kind of give the impression that one is better than the other, or that oh, I would have rather done one or the other. We had a great time doing both. But that being said, I mean, and I also realize that in Caid, the experience of being a landed baron is perhaps somewhat different than other kingdoms. But being a baron, being a landed baron, is sort of a position of stability. You're there for the long run. You're even, you're there longer than the baronial officers are. And so you kind of provide continuity throughout the barony. Um, as the crown, you're more in a position of kind of being a figurehead for the short term, of being the inspiration, of kind of helping people carry their goals forward, and being the inspiration for your short reign, knowing that it's going to be busy and exhausting, but you'll survive it, and hand the torch off to someone else at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I was around for your reigns, and because I'm old, and well, I can definitely say you brought a sense of theater and also a sense of fun and kind of play to the reigns too. And I assume that was purposeful, correct?
Yeah, I mean, again, to me, the crown is the figurehead of the SCA. You as king and queen, ironically, have very little actual authority, but you have a great deal of influence. And so, being the embodiment of what everybody wants the SCA to be, to me, was an important part of that role. And beyond. I wanted it to be something beyond just showing up and giving out awards, to help people to enjoy coming to court, to feel like the themes that we set at these events, can come to life, and to be, literally the star of a show that everybody is part of. And to me, that was really an important part of making everyone feel like they were playing a role in the wonderful pageant that is a tournament every weekend.
Yeah, I can definitely say it felt like a show a lot of the time. I mean,
Yes.
so, yeah, I mean, it was definitely quite memorable. And I just want to say, at least personally, I've really appreciated throughout the years the support that you and Her Grace have given to the rapier community and your involvement in it. I mean, she was out there fighting, and you guys doing cut and thrust and unarmored, and along with other forms. It's very inspiring to see the variety and the very visible support from the different positions you've had throughout the years. It really means a lot to the community.
Well, and I mean, in a contrary sense, I also think that the rapier and cut and thrust community provide a real inspiration to the SCA, because in a lot of ways that's where innovation in historical research of medieval martial arts and Renaissance martial arts is taking place. It's the folks in the rapier community, the cut and thrust community, some of the armored steel fighting experiment, those kind of things that are really looking into some of this new research, in the last 10 years or so, that's been going on, that gives us more insight into what sword fighting in period was all about.
Right. Well, I think that kind of leads into the next thing I want to ask you about. So looking over your order of precedence, for your laurel, the field of recognition is listed as chivalric art. So could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So I mean, the broad statement that I think that the Laurels Council was making there, is to recognize me as someone who kind of looks into all the things that created the chivalric society, the chivalric culture in the Middle Ages. A lot of people kind of perceive that as, well, can you get a laurel in fighting? it sort of is, but in a lot of ways it also isn't. It's about the things that take place kind of around the culture of martial arts in the Middle Ages, but also things like understanding Arthurian legend, understanding performance and drama in the Middle Ages, which kind of tied into the conversation we were having about being on the throne and making that sort of a theatrical performance. And also in researching into historically accurate and documentable fighting styles, not just fighting kind of by the conventions of the SCA, because as much as we all love SCA fighting, it is a modern construct. It is a modern form of stick fighting sport, and you can do it quite well without really knowing anything about historical combat. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't research historical combat and bring it out onto the rattan fighting field in the SCA, but it's not inherent in SCA armored combat.
So this is probably the easiest interview so far because you're setting me up for each thing I want to hit on. So that passion and desire and embracing of not just what works in an SCA tournament, but evolving and bringing in those period ideas, it's kind of led you to explore those areas, maybe even outside the SCA a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, so to me, once I had won crown twice, I obviously I don't want to make it sound like, well, I checked off that box and I'm moving on. But once I had won crown and felt like I was at least a moderately respectable, skilled fighter in that field, I kind of wanted to take on the challenge of learning a little more. And at the time, there was sort of a movement into the nascent exploration of historical unarmored combat in our kingdom at the time. We called it the Unarmored Fighting Program. So, to me, I wanted to challenge myself to not just be a good fighter, but to be a good fighter who understood research into medieval swordsmanship and to armored combat at in the way that, as far as we know, they actually did it in the Middle Ages. I started researching that field quite significantly. And that led me to start my own historical fencing program here in San Diego called San Diego Longsword, part of a greater program called Chivalry Today, which explores the ideals of chivalry in the modern world. And so, yeah, it has led me to run my own historical fencing program. I actually now work as the historical fencing coach at 2 fencing academies down here in San Diego.
Wow, that's great that you're able to embrace that passion and really build something around it and share it with other people too, and not just within the SCA compliance, but just bringing more people in and really kind of go down that path. Now you mentioned Chivalry Today. You kind of expanded that not just into fighting, but kind of more about ideals, and it's more of a resource, right?
Yeah, ironically, I started the program called Chivalry Today. Originally, it was going to be part of a book that I was writing on applying the ideals of chivalry in the modern world. That rapidly expanded to something that was, almost out of my control, into teaching historical fencing as part of the program, into doing summer camps for kids and coming up with games and activities to help them understand how to be a better person, how to live by a code of honor, and doing a podcast where I did interviews with various researchers and experts and authors, not just on sword fighting and martial arts, but who research all aspects of medieval history, who write fiction and nonfiction books, who study and teach philosophy, and that's been quite a lot of fun for me as well, to have conversations with experts in their field and to find out what they have to say about the ideals of chivalry, but in a lot of cases also to help them understand a little more about chivalry and the philosophy behind it.
Now you have is all this online? I mean, you have a podcast, so is it YouTube, or where would you go for it?
Yeah, all of the podcasts are available both on the Chivalry Today website, chivalrytoday.com. Pretty much anywhere you find podcasts, Apple, podcasts, or Stitcher, or any of the podcasting services, you can find the Chivalry Today podcast on there. And there's about 100 episodes that I've done over the course of the last 8 years that we've been doing it. Every time I look through the list of back episodes, I'm surprised at how diverse the topics are, from everything from like Robin Hood and the Boy Scouts, and various aspects of historical fencing and fighting, and also the number of people who are willing to talk to me about this rather odd little topic. The number of people with the doctor and PhD attached to their name who come on the show and talk about the ideals of chivalry with me.
So who would you say was your most engaging guest? Like you just didn't want to end the interview with?
Yeah. I had an author. His name was Pierre Forney, who wrote a book about the importance of civility. And he's actually been on Oprah and has TED Talks to his name and that sort of thing. But very engaging and interesting speaker who talks about civility as part of being a Renaissance man, and how civility was seen in courtly culture through the Middle Ages and Renaissance, and in very much the same way as I like to look at chivalry, sees the importance of being a civilized and cultured person in the modern world.
Well, I think there's a lot of people on Facebook that should watch that podcast right about now.
Yes, isn't that the truth?
Oof. So a couple other things, and we'll have to move on. But so you're also a published author, right? You have some books out there, and this was back before you just go to Amazon and go, "Well, I'm a published author," right?
Yes, they are actually books that you could go into the bookstore and turn your head sideways and see the title on the shelf. So yes, through a legitimate publisher, although that, like as you imply, that term is changing significantly. But yes, absolutely, a couple of books of short stories and essays that include pieces written by me. One called Steampunk Shakespeare, in which I wrote a story about A Midsummer Night's Steam, a steampunk version of Midsummer Night's Dream. One called Krampusnacht, which is a horror anthology about about the Krampus, the German folklore devil that accompanies St. Nicholas on his rounds. And my story, A Krampus Carol, is included in that book. And I've written also a couple of pieces for the Pop Culture and Philosophy series from Open Court Press. My pieces are included in the books Batman, Superman, and Philosophy, a chapter on chivalry and Batman and Superman, and as you might expect, a chapter in their book Martial Arts and Philosophy on historical fencing and chivalry.
Wow, that's fantastic. I noticed you didn't do a chapter about me. That's okay.
Well, it would be too big to contain within the covers of a book.
Oh, I'll agree with that. And then last thing, so you've been on stage performing Shakespeare too, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what plays have you appeared in?
I've done some parts with some theater companies here in San Diego. I've been part of 2 productions in San Diego, as along with the San Diego Shakespeare Society. The most memorable is I got to play King Henry V in a performance of scenes from Henry V. I get to do the St. Crispin's Day speech, which was awesome, let me tell you. And I also got the massive role of Rosencrantz in a production of Hamlet. But I also have been managed to secure the role of King Arthur in a performance of Camelot, put on by American Rose Theater, a professional regional theater down here in San Diego. And I can happily say that I pretty much got that role because I was the only actor who came with his own suit of armor.
And a sword. I hope you had a sword at the time too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did the St. Crispin's Day speech for us for one of the pre-shows that we did last month.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
So this is the point. I turned to Bjorn because Bjorn will have some of the question, but you're not going to be able to hear him just because of how this thing works. But so Bjorn, do you have a question you want me to relay? Well, you might hear him. Let's find out.
I do have a question for His Grace. You don't? Okay. My question involves taking over a barony from an institution. How was it to become the Baron after Talank, who had held the position of founding Baron of Calafia for well over 20 years? What was it like stepping into those shoes?
You didn't read his lips? He was wondering what it was like stepping in after someone as the baronial Baron and Baroness, after someone that had sat in that seat for about 20 years for Talank. What was it like walking into an established institution and trying to make it your own?
Yeah, so Talanki had been Baron for 26 years, and was very beloved in the barony. He was the founding Baron, and certainly deserves every bit of credit for making Calafia what it is. But one of the things that I've come to recognize over the years with barons is you can't be everything to everybody, and so Talanki was a great patron of the arts. He made Calafia a strong and vibrant community back in the days. Hey, back before the internet, back largely before there was this very easy travel from San Diego to Los Angeles to downtown Caid, when Calafia was kind of on the remote edges of the kingdom. He really brought this barony together and made it a strong entity. But he wasn't a fighter. There were aspects of the barony that, although he supported, he wasn't a part of. So as Baron stepping in, for me particularly, one of the real important parts of my role as Baron was kind of bringing the martial aspects of the SCA into focus, into the spotlight, and having the Baron be part of that community within our barony, but in passing that on, having to realize that not every baron in the lineage was going to do it the same way, and so other barons, Baron David, certainly very active in the arts community, very active in the period cooking community, supported the fighters as best he could, but was active in a very different way. So, it's sort of like, the history of the barony is like making a wall, but you can't just stack bricks in a row and make a strong wall. They've all got to kind of interlock and interact to a degree and overlap as much as they can. But that's sort of what taking on the role of a baron is: making the barony your own for your time, and then passing it on and hoping that it's stronger for your service.
Man, I should have absolutely talked to you before I stepped up at Altavia. Anyway, so one of the things, and since you're not going to be able to hear Bjorn, we like to do with our guests is we like to have a little trivia game with you. So I'm going to, Bjorn can read it and you'll see it on screen. So Bjorn, what's the name of this week's game?
What doth the bard say?
That's right. So as you mentioned, you have some familiarity with Shakespeare and Batman and Superman. So I'm going to read you some quotes.
Some great literary figures from history of those three.
So you have to identify whether it's a quote from Shakespeare or it's a quote from Batman. So, and not just the movies, could be comic books. Okay. So we'll just do a few of these, and we'll keep score. I mean, oh no, this is just for fun. As flies to wanton boys are we to the gods. They kill us for their sport. Batman or Shakespeare?
I'm going to have to say Shakespeare on that one.
That is Shakespeare. Ding. You'll hunt me. You'll condemn me. Set the dogs on me.
Well, as much as that could be Macbeth saying that, perhaps to Banquo as he's leaving, but I believe that's Batman.
That is Batman. Very nice. That blood should sprinkled me to make me grow.
Well, again, that could be possibly Batman as he plummets down into the cavern beneath Wayne Manor, but I think Shakespeare.
Oh my gosh, you're 3 for 3 so far. We both stared into the abyss, but when it looked back at us, you blinked.
Are you sure that's not Milton? No, I think that would have to be Batman.
That is Batman. Oh my gosh. I need to make these harder next time. They have tied me to a stake. I cannot fly, but bear-like I must fight the course.
Again, I believe that is, although there are similarities between Richard III and Batman, I think that's Shakespeare.
That is. Almost done. Your feast is nearly over. From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Batman?
Batman, yes. Let's see. Oh, that one's too easy. Well, I'll give this one. This is like a toss for you. I will grind your bones to dust, and with your blood, and I'll make it a paste.
Well, as much as I might be worried about what Alfred would be cooking in the kitchens in Wayne Manor, I think that's Titus Andronicus. I think that's Shakespeare.
Grief forgives what can never be forgiven.
Say that one again.
Grief forgives what can never be forgiven.
Shakespeare.
Oh, no, that was bad.
No, really? Okay, that was a good one.
Oh, like the other sucked? Thanks. Vengeance is in my heart, death in my hand. Blood and revenge are hammering in my head.
Batman.
Shakespeare. Oh,
Shakespeare,
you've lost your mojo. One last one, because you're still ahead.
Wait, I want to know what play that's from, though.
I don't know. They have this thing called Google. You should try it out sometime.
Great. Awesome.
Smoldering, I burn you. Burning you, I flare, hot and bright and fierce and beautiful.
Batman.
Batman. That is right. Very nice. So you missed two out of like 12. Very nice. You know your Shakespeare and your Batman.
And Batman. Excellent. Is there someone in the home audience that gets my voice as their voicemail because of that?
Very nice. Yeah. Wait. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
Someone says, I've never realized how Shakespearean Batman is. Well, that's true. Anyway.
Well, and I mean, it's interesting having, let's talk about, weird connections. I have 2 episodes of my podcast that are about Batman and chivalry. And it's interesting that Adam West said that the way he played Batman back in the 60s was by playing it as if he was playing Hamlet, with the gravity and poetry of Shakespeare.
Nice. Well, Batman is the Dark Knight, so it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time. It's such a pleasure to see you. I know you tolerate me most of the time, but thank you for, this is me just personally, thank you for everything you bring and how much you try to embody the ideals that are important to you and are important to make a more civil and chivalrous society. And setting that example and sharing your knowledge, I do appreciate it. And, I give you a hard time, but that's fun for me.
Well, I appreciate it, Laertes. Thank you, and for everybody in your audience. I mean, it is important to know that are the connections that we have, the friends that we make, the community that we have here, including you, sir. Are important. That we make a difference. It's so meaningful to me when people say out in the real world, or the SCA is just a game. This is the real world. These connections are what make it real. The rest of that stuff, that's way less important.
Yeah, we could definitely use some more chivalry and civility right now. So thank you very much. Everyone, please go to his website, check out the podcast. Now I sound like a real show. And Thank you very much, and we'll see you later, Your Grace. Say hello to Her
Thank
Grace
you.
for me. We'll see you
I
around.
will do that. Bye-bye.
All right, let's bring Bjorn back. Oh, you're on the weird side. This is so odd for me. That was great. Oh my gosh, I just started sitting and chatting with Guillaume.
Oh yeah. When I first moved here, he had just been elevated to the Pelican by Tamiki and Luciana. And Tamiki is an excellent actor. And to sit and just kind of hang out with Tamiki and Guillaume, kind of toss, soliloquies back and forth is really a lot of fun. Just to, as a bard, it's so cool to just not be in the middle of something and just sit back and watch other people just take over a space. And Guillaume is definitely one of those people that can do that.
Yeah. Very talented and passionate person and member of the kingdom. Very lucky to have him around. So who do we have coming up for our bardic performance today?
The next person that will be taking over a space we have is one of our dear friends from Leandamere, and it is Lady Batu Sechen Tsagaajin. And she is going to be performing for us this evening. She was one of the co-stewards for the recent Leandamere investiture, and all of the nifty things that they just did. For example, she was one of the people that was partly responsible for the virtual feast. So she's one of the newer people in the SCA. I mean, newer, last 5, 6, 7 years. And we're just really, really happy that she's also a wonderful performer, and she'll be performing for us this evening.
All righty. Well, I'm going to make you go away and bring her in just a moment. So she's going to be here in just a moment. Oh, hello. Oh, I went the wrong way. Hi. oh, yes, I forgot to unmute you. Yay, that's my third one, isn't it? That's my second one. I forget. I lose count. Oh my gosh, I really need a producer. So hi, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
Oh man, that was such a good interview, and I'm really excited to have you here and share the talents with everyone tonight. So as Bjorn was hitting on there, how long have you been in the SCA?
We're working on year 5.
Oh, nice. And how did you stumble across us?
Well, honestly, I stumbled across the SCA back in like 2001. I was working at the Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair at the time, and our Renaissance Fair there had the unique distinction of being the only Renaissance Fair run by SCA people. So we were actually a really historically accurate fair with all of the, the extra trappings of fair and such too. But that was when I first heard about it. And then years later, after I moved out to California, and Gyra and I were looking for more social outlets or whatever, he's like, I've always been interested in the SCA. Would that be something you'd be interested in? I'm like, I've already got the costumes. I used to work at Renaissance Fair, kind of thing. So, and here we are.
Awesome. And would you say your main passion, other than doing a whole lot of service, as we know, is the bardic arts and performing and such?
I actually shy away from bardic arts in the SCA just simply because normally I sing, first of all, and I'm an operatically trained soprano, but my voice type is the type that would sing Wagner and Puccini. So it's a very modern type voice that doesn't lend itself well to historic pieces. So I tend to not sing, but I do use my voice for morning cries at the various and sundry wars. And I will sing at that time to get people's attention. And as far as storytelling, it's really awkward because I actually don't have period stories to tell. So I just kind of use stories that sound period, like the one I'm going to read today.
Right. I mean, there are times to embrace the period songs and stories and such, and there's times to entertain in a period setting, right? So you can be period adjacent and still entertain. So, speaking of which, what are you going to read to us tonight?
Well, one of my favorite authors is Edgar Allan Poe. He's so my favorite author in that I did my entire undergraduate senior speech recital on him. So I have over 100 clock hours of research on his life and death and all of that. And I love the way his stories are written, because they're written in such a way that they really can kind of mimic some of the stylings of the middle English, middle to modern English.
Okay. So I'll turn the floor over to you if you want to introduce the piece, and let's hear your story.
Okay, so the story I'm going to read for you today is a very short one. It's probably his shortest story that I am aware of. And it is also not a very well-known story. It is called Silence of Fable. "Listen to me," said the demon as he placed his hand upon my head. "There is a spot upon this accursed earth which thou hast never yet beheld, and if by any chance thou hast beheld it, it must have been in one of those vigorous dreams which come like the simoon upon the brain of the sleeper who hath lain down to sleep among the forbidden sunbeams. Among the sunbeams, I say, which slide from off the solemn columns of the melancholy temples in the wilderness. The region of which I speak is a dreary region in Libya, by the borders of the river Zaire, and there is no quiet there, nor silence. The waters of the river have a saffron and sickly hue, and they flow not outwards to the sea, but palpitate forever and forever beneath the red eye of the sun, with a tumultuous and convulsive motion. For many miles on either side of the river's oozy bed is a pale desert of gigantic water lilies. They sigh one unto the other in that solitude, and stretch towards the heaven their long, ghastly necks, and nod to and fro their everlasting heads. And there is an indistinct murmur which cometh out from among them like the rushing of subterranean water, and they sigh one unto another. But there is a boundary to their realm, the boundary of the dark, horrible, lofty forest. There, like the waves about the Hebrides, the low underwood is agitated continually, but there is no wind throughout the heaven, and the tall, primeval trees rock eternally, hither and thither, with a crashing and mighty sound, and from their high summits, one by one, drop everlasting dews. And at the roots, strange, poisonous flowers lie writhing in perturbed slumber. And overhead, with a rustling and loud noise, the gray clouds rush westwardly forever, until they roll, a cataract, over the fiery wall of the horizon. But there is no wind throughout the heaven, and by the shores of the river Zaire, there is neither quiet nor silence. It was night, and the rain fell. And falling, it was rain, but having fallen, it was blood. And I stood in the morass among the tall lilies, and the rain fell upon my head, and the lilies sighed one unto the other in the solemnity of their desolation. And all at once, the moon arose through the thin, ghastly mist, and was crimson in color. And mine eyes fell upon a huge gray rock, which stood by the shore of the river, and was litten by the light of the moon. And the rock was gray, ghastly, and tall, and the rock was gray. Upon its front were characters engraven in the stone, and I walked through the morass of water lilies until I came close unto the shore, that I might read the characters upon the stone. But I could not decipher the characters. And I was going back into the morass, when the moon shone with a fuller red, and I turned and looked again upon the rock and upon the characters. And the characters were desolation. And I looked upwards, and there stood a man upon the summit of the rock, and I hid myself among the water lilies that I might discover the actions of the man. And the man was tall and stately in form, and was wrapped up from his shoulders to his feet in the toga of old Rome. And the outlines of his figure were indistinct, but his features were the features of a deity. For the mantle of night, and of the mist, and of the moon, and of the dew had left uncovered the features of his face. And his brow was lofty with thought, and his eyes wild with care, and in the few furrows upon his cheeks I read the fable of sorrow, and weariness, and disgust with mankind, and a longing after solitude. And the moon shone upon his face and upon the features of his face, and oh, they were more beautiful than the airy dreams which hovered about the souls of the daughters of Delos. And the man sat down upon the rock and leaned his head upon his hand and looked out upon the desolation. He looked down into the low, unquiet shrubbery, and up into the tall, primeval trees, and up higher at the rustling heaven, and into the crimson moon. And I lay close within shelter of the lilies, and observed the actions of the man, and the man trembled in the solitude. But the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. And the man turned his attention from the heaven and looked out upon the dreary river Zaire, and upon the yellow, ghastly waters, and upon the pale legions of water lilies. And the man listened to the sighs of the water lilies, and the murmur that came up from among them. And I lay close within my covert, and observed the actions of the man. And the man trembled in the solitude. But the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. Then I went down into the recesses of the morass, and waded afar in among the wilderness of the lilies, and called up to the hippopotami which dwelt among the ferns in the recesses of the morass. And the hippopotami heard my call, and came with the behemoth unto the foot of the rock, and roared loudly and fearfully beneath the moon. And I lay close within my covert, and observed the actions of the man. And the man trembled in the solitude. But the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. Then I cursed the elements with the curse of tumult, and a frightful tempest gathered in the heaven where before there had been no wind, and the heaven became livid with the violence of the tempest. And the rain beat down upon the head of the man, and the floods of the river came down, and the river was tormented into foam, and the water lilies shrieked within their beds, and the forest crumbled before the wind, and the thunder rolled, and the lightning fell, and the rock rocked to its foundation. And I lay close within my covert, and observed the actions of the man, and the man trembled in the solitude. But the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. Then I grew angry and cursed with the curse of silence, the river and the lilies and the wind and the forest and the heaven and the thunder and the sighs of the water lilies, and they became accursed and were still. And the moon ceased to totter in its pathway up the heaven, and the thunder died away, and the lightning did not flash, and the clouds hung motionless, and the waters sunk to their level and remained, and the trees ceased to rock, and the water lilies sighed no more, and the murmur was heard no longer from among them, nor any shadow of sound throughout the vast, illimitable desert. And I looked upon the characters of the rock, and they were changed, and the characters were silence. And mine eyes fell upon the countenance of the man, and his countenance was wan with terror, And hurriedly he raised his head from his hand and stood forth upon the rock and listened. But there was no voice throughout the vast, illimitable desert, and the characters upon the rock were silence. And the man shuddered and turned his face away and fled afar off, and I beheld him no more. Now there are fine tales in the volumes of the Magi, in the iron-bound, melancholy volumes of the Magi. Therein, I say, are glorious histories of the heaven and of the earth, and of the mighty sea, and of the genial that overruled the sea and the earth and the lofty heaven. There was much lore, too, in the sayings which were said by the Sibyls, and holy things were heard of old by the dim leaves that trembled around Dodona. But, as Allah liveth, that fable which the demon told me as he sat by my side in the shadow of the tomb, I hold that to be the most wonderful of all. And as the demon made an end of his story, he fell back within the cavity of the tomb and laughed. And I could not laugh with the demon. And he cursed me because I could not laugh. And the lynx, which dwelleth forever in the tomb, came out therefrom and lay down at the feet of the demon and looked at him steadily in the face. And that is Silence, a Fable. You're muted, Master Laertes.
I think that's a record. I think 4 is a record now, and you were here for it. I was thanking you for dropping by, then I realized you really didn't go anywhere. We came to you. So, but thank you for sharing the story and the performance. And I enjoy a little Poe every now and then. So, I just want to encourage you and His Grace, if he's still listening, to check the comments. There's lots of nice things said about both of y'all today. And lots of comments about me forgetting to unmute people too. But thank you so much. Continue the good work. Like I kind of touched on, you carry a lot of offices in Leon de Mer. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the performance, and hopefully we'll be able to see each other in person sometime soon.
That'd be fun.
All righty. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now, let me see. Oh, and he's not muted. He can talk right away. Hi, Bjorn.
Are we sure? Okay.
Oh my gosh. I think 4 really is. Oh, before we go, I just want to point out that His Grace was 8 for 10, so it's a passing grade. He got a B. And the one he was asking, the Shakespeare quote he was asking about, was from Titus Andronicus. So there we go.
Well, if you're going to have any kind of Shakespearean quotes about bones being ground into grist for a mill or pies or what have you, it's going to be Titus Andronicus.
We need a T-shirt that says that. So let's wrap up for the day. So,
Kingdom fundraiser.
There you go. So let's talk about who's going to be here next week, and so everyone can go have dinner. So next week's going to be guests both from the Kingdom of Anstiora. I thought it was a good opportunity to go beyond our kingdom borders. For our interview, I'll be talking to Master Wele van, I forget his last name because I always call him Wele, Hagenbold. If you don't know him, he is a Laurel. He's a falconer. He travels, or did travel, around the world doing jousting. He's also one of the early White Scarves in the Kingdom of Anstiora, so one of the early White Scarves overall. So I thought it was a great opportunity just to talk to someone that, especially on the jousting aspect of it, he produces a jousting event. That would be a great opportunity to talk to him. And then we also have the premier bard of Anstiora, and who would that be?
I'm honestly having difficulty with the name.
I know. That's why I totally set you up for that. We'll get the pronunciation of his name, but he.
Well, I think everyone calls him Tenoch, I think.
Yeah. You can cheat and call him by his nickname. But yeah, so it should be a great opportunity to hear from people outside of Caid and hear a bard that we probably wouldn't have the opportunity to hear this kind of one-on-one situation on. So I'm really looking forward to next week.
Me too.
All righty. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you to our guests. And we will be back next week. And once again, when we're back, we will be live from Caid. We'll see you then.